All right, it's time to talk about what happened at COP29 and where we go from here. The 29th United Nations climate negotiations in Baku, Azerbaijan just wrapped up last month, and there's no sugarcoating it. This year's outcome was a global embarrassment. On the heels of last year's historic agreement where all 196 member countries pledged to transition away from fossil fuels, this year's meeting, billed the Finance COP, was meant to land a plan for rich countries to pay the trillions we owe in climate debt to the global south to cope with the impacts of climate change and transition to renewable energy. And while a deal was struck in the end, it was in so many ways worse than no agreement at all. Instead of the $1.3 trillion a year needed in public finance, the world's wealthiest countries refused to guarantee anything at all in direct grants. They instead committed to mobilize $300 billion through a combination of private and public funding sometime in the next 10 years. In the words of Caroline Brouillette, Executive Director of Climate Action Network Canada, this deal is like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. And to cap it all off, the other major decision made in Baku was to operationalize carbon markets, one of the most contentious and controversial parts of the Kyoto Protocol. Carbon markets essentially allow rich countries to buy carbon offsets, which have been proven not to work, from global south countries, instead of, actually cutting their own climate pollution. While all eyes were on the money at this Finance COP, Stand.earth's forest campaigners were also working hard to call out governments and lobbyists for their continued support of dangerous distractions from real climate solutions at COP29. Especially biomass energy, which destroys forests and creates more climate pollution at the smokestack than coal. Yes, you heard that right, coal. The next UN climate conference is set for a year from now in Brazil and has already billed the Forest Cup, where forest protection will be the top priority. So this year, we put burning forest for energy on the agenda early on, with a press conference spotlighting this highly polluting fuel, and joined grassroots partners from around the world at actions denouncing false solutions and calling for real climate justice. When our partners at Environmental Paper Network's Biomass Action Network released a new report detailing the growing threat of biomass, we joined them to launch these important findings at COP29. We also continue to build momentum towards changing the loopholes at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which allow logging and burning forests for fuel to be counted as a carbon-neutral renewable energy. And we began mobilizing to keep big biomass out of the carbon market schemes that were gavelled through at COP, and that risk unleashing a wave of forest-destroying carbon offset projects. For Stand.earth's Amazonia program, COP29 was an important step along a path that started with the UN Convention on Biodiversity, aka COP16, which was held back in October in Colombia, and it ends at COP30 in Brazil, which will be the first time the climate and biodiversity negotiations will be held in Amazonian countries. In Baku, our team supported indigenous leaders from the Amazon as they participated in the negotiations and side events. One of these events was the Indigenous Troika, in which Sonia Guajajara, Brazil's Minister of Indigenous Peoples, stressed the importance of securing a strong presence of indigenous peoples in the discussions and decision-making processes, as they have been the guardians of the world's largest rainforest for millennia. Since the explicit mention of transitioning away fossil fuels was intentionally removed from official documents and oil expansion continues to grow in Peru, Ecuador, and Brazil, it was critical that we presented our research on banks that continue to finance oil and gas in the Amazon, directly undermining our 1.5°C global warming goal. One thing is clear, if future COPs are going to be effective, they need to be reformed to end the insidious influence of the fossil fuel lobby once and for all. And in the meantime, actions taken by national, state, and city governments to wind down fossil fuels and invest in a climate-safe future are more crucial than ever. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said at the end of COP29, failure is not an option, and we can't agree more. We will do everything in our power to ensure that COP30 will mark a turning point in protecting the Amazon and indigenous peoples and stopping dangerous distractions like biomass.